All right, I have an incredible show for you today. I have the world famous Roger Stone, a man who is infamous within the political community for helping big names such as Donald Trump become president of the United States. Roger, thank you so much for joining me today.
Stephen, it's great to be back with you. It is truly, truly a historic day. I had the privilege of being at Mar-a-Lago last night with President Trump as he celebrated a smashing, indeed a historic victory. People lose sight of the fact that it wasn't so many months ago that people thought that Florida Governor Ron DeSantis would pose a serious challenge to President Trump. And if not him, perhaps it would be former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley, who evidently withdrew from the campaign this morning. So this really is historic in many, many ways. It's not just the margins by which he is winning, but it's also the turnout. He is setting records for people turning out. And that tells you, as a professional, that the American people very badly want change. They're unhappy with the status quo. They are enthusiastic in their support for Trump, and it is reflected in these numbers.
Yeah, the numbers are, I mean, he's just smashing record after record. A year ago when you and I first started meeting, did you see this popularity, this surge, or do you think all of the persecution and prosecution has just fueled the American people to get behind this underdog who's really not an underdog?
Well, it's a two-pronged answer, I guess. I really do believe that when he was nominated in 2016 and when he ran for re-election in 2020, that Donald Trump changed the face of the Republican Party, that the party went from being a country club, elitist party of Wall Street and big business to being more of a middle-class party, the party of working families. And that was reflected, I think, largely in his economic policies. I mean, between the tax cuts and the regulatory cuts, he successfully fostered the most robust economy in history, but it was one that touched average people. So gas prices went to their lowest point, for example. Inflation was virtually non-existent. Jobs were actually plentiful. There were more jobs than there were people in every single category: young, old, black, white, urban, rural, Asian, Hispanic. Unemployment levels hit all-time low. We actually moved to what was close to full employment. That hasn't happened since really the days of Reagan. So I think the underlying fundamentals for a political comeback were very, very much there. Then secondarily, as you contrast the peace and prosperity of the Trump days, combining it with the border security, with the chaos that we have today in every realm. Last night, I was asked by a TV reporter whether I was concerned that once the choice was down to Trump versus Biden, that people would refocus on the reasons they don't like Trump. And I said, no, actually, I welcome a comparison of the Trump years and the Biden years. And by any measure, Biden's presidency is a disaster. He had to dip into the strategic petroleum reserves to try to manipulate gasoline prices before the last election. That's because we are no longer energy independent. We were not only, for the first time ever, energy independent, meaning we were getting all of our gas and oil from beneath our own surface, but we were on our way to being energy dominant in the world, the number one exporter of energy, as well as fulfilling all our own requirements. The policies of this administration have not only driven gas prices out of sight, but they've also, oddly enough, empowered our enemies. And Iran is back to importing hundreds of millions of dollars worth of oil. We, through sanctions, had basically shut that down. The Russians, who have oil and gas, are newly not only emboldened, but they're also enabled and enriched. So the policy of basically shutting down drilling permits for gas and oil, for trying to move us towards really questionable green energy, this has, I think, caused a nostalgia in the country for the policies of Trump. And now, then, on top of all of that, to answer your question, you add this weaponization of the criminal justice system, in which Trump is facing charges that most people think are politically motivated. I mean, his handling of classified documents that are either classified or top secret. Trump claims, and I think he's right. I'm not a lawyer, but I believe he's right, that under the 1997 Presidential Records Act, he's entitled to do whatever he wants with his documents, including deciding what he can retain, what he can send back to the government. There is a decision in the D.C. Circuit by Judge Amy Berman Jackson, who ironically sat on my trial, in which she ruled that former President Bill Clinton essentially could do whatever he wants with his documents, including, in his case, keep them in his sock drawer. Now, on top of that, we learn that Joe Biden very definitely, to quote the special counsel's report, willfully handled and retained top secret and classified documents that he was, as vice president and a U.S. senator, never legally allowed to retain. But we're told in the same breath that, well, but he won't be prosecuted for these actions, well, because he's an elderly man with a bad memory. And they also lie to us and say, well, the difference is that he cooperated in the investigation where Trump did not. But the special counsel's report doesn't say that. What it says is the search of his home, which is distinct from the search of his garage, where additional top secret and restricted documents were found, was conducted without his permission. So in other words, he was not cooperating. People look at that and they see a two-tiered justice system. This is, I think, also true, for example, in Georgia, where the corruption of the prosecutor is on full display. And people have lost sight of what was Trump's crime. Well, they claim his crime was knowingly losing the Georgia election and seeking to direct the Secretary of State to, quote unquote, find 11,860 additional ballots, meaning the implication would be to manufacture them. But if you listen to the audio or you read the transcript of that very long conversation between Secretary of State Raffensperger and President Donald Trump, in which there are many, many lawyers involved, Stephen, it's very clear that Trump doesn't tell him that at all. What Trump tells him is, look, you have already inadvertently counted 11,860 illegal ballots. People who moved out of state, people who are deceased, people who are registered to vote from post office boxes and therefore are ineligible. And once you deduct them, I would carry the state. It's not the same as telling them to go out and manufacture ballots. So I think people see through this. And to finally kind of answer your question, yes, it has turbocharged his campaign in a way that could never have been contemplated. It's counterintuitive. Normally, when a candidate is charged with a federal or state crime, their fundraising dries up, their voter support dries up, and they are very soon out of the race. In this case, the charges against Trump, I think, are so demonstrably thin that it's actually, although it's hurt him obviously very badly financially, and while it is also draining his time, which is a very key factor in politics, his time is a resource, but I think it has actually, so far at least, actually aided him politically. At least that would be my reading of these poll results.
Yeah, it's almost like the master of getting eyeballs was combined with the mainstream media inadvertently giving him even more eyeballs. It's like you couldn't buy the kind of exposure that he's getting, even though it's negative. I think people see through it, and so they are rooting for him. One of my worries, Roger, is they've thrown a lot at him. But is this just the beginning of what they're going to throw at him between now and November? Or do you think they're losing steam? Or is there a big October surprise that you and I should anticipate?
Well, first of all, I recognize that there was widespread celebration over the Supreme Court decision, which said, based on a case that was brought in Colorado, that the states do not have the power to ban a federal candidate from the ballot. However, in our euphoria, we should not lose sight of the fact that that decision was exceedingly narrow. The court never actually addressed the question of whether Article 14 of the Constitution, subsection 3, meant that Trump was ineligible to hold the office of president. Now, the president's lawyers didn't ask for judgment on that question. I think I disagree with that. Again, I'm not a lawyer, but my guess is that if he wins, that entire question is now going to be revisited. There will be new litigation. It'll be as flawed as the old litigation because this idea that he engaged in insurrection, he has not been charged or convicted in any court of law for the crime of insurrection. So if you say, well, he engaged in an insurrection, as some crazy radio reporter last night at Mar-a-Lago kept insisting, well, that's your opinion. That's not a legal decision. And therefore, there is no basis with which to eliminate him. Actually, a piece in The Atlantic, this one blows my mind, where they say, well, in light of this Supreme Court decision, if Trump wins the next election, perhaps Democrats should simply refuse to certify his victory in the Electoral College. Wait a minute. Isn't that precisely the crime that even today they accuse Donald Trump of committing? So, in other words, it would be okay if they did it. Sometimes the hypocrisy of these lunatics on the left just boggles the mind. The other thing I would say, Stephen, we already see this, is the left always recycles the same BS. In other words, it doesn't matter how debunked or discredited or disproved one of their crazy ideas is, they're so deeply invested in it, they will just recycle it as if they never heard the truth. So we're right back to, well, Trump colluded with the Russians in his original election in 2016. And if you don't believe it, look at the U.S. Senate Intelligence Committee report. Now, that report is a veritable piece of crap. Virtually everything in it is incorrect. I can say specifically, every reference to me in the report is categorically false. It's almost as if somebody went to Salon or the Huffington Post or some propaganda front and cut out and pasted in sections from those outlets as if those are facts. Those are not facts. It's interesting that I was sued by this Project Democracy, I think it was called, prior to being charged. And when we got to court, all of their evidence were quotes from left-wing media outlets, which that's not evidence, that's not proof, that's an accusation without proof. But that's what they came up with. By the way, that lawsuit was dismissed.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Just staying with the Supreme Court theme, I read yesterday that Representative Jamie Raskins from Maryland, the guy who led both impeachment charges against Donald Trump, specifically put himself in charge of the second impeachment, he's now saying, oh, wait a minute. Okay, yes, it might have been a 9-0 ruling from the Supreme Court, but 5 of the 4 left open that Congress could pass a law that would keep Donald Trump off the ballot in all 50 states. So now he's trying to rally the Democrat troops to pass some kind of new legislation that would label Trump an insurrectionist and remove him from the ballot. Is this going to be a fruitless thing or just an uphill battle, or is this going to fall on its face?
It's a very interesting a question. Jamie Raskin rapidly replacing Adam Schiff as the most odious character in Congress, really a congenital liar, has lied about me on a number of occasions, just a complete demagogue. Interestingly enough, Raskin and his wife, who's a federal judge, I believe, in fact, she was the federal official who illegally unmasked General Flynn. They both made millions and millions of dollars in stock trades, which they somehow neglected to report in their required disclosure forms. Now, if he were a Republican, he'd be on his way to the pokey, but because he's not, nobody thinks much of it. Such legislation would have to pass both houses and be signed by the president. I think today you could not pass that in the House, but the Republican margin in the House is wafer thin. It's extraordinarily thin. It is not clear to me that this can happen in this Congress, but very clearly they will try to make it happen. I'm not sure about the legislative prospects. I'm just beginning to read about this myself, Stephen. So next time we're together, you can ask me again. But I don't know what the prospects are, but very clearly that is their agenda.
Yeah. Okay, you touched on Adam Schiff. He's somebody that has bugged me for years because his discussion of this Russia story during the Mueller investigation, I'm not going to lie, it kind of got me. I remember thinking like, oh my gosh, this guy sits on this committee that understands national security. Maybe I'm missing something, and it was lie after lie after lie. How has this guy not been booted out of Congress? Now he's successfully running for the open Senate seat in California. He doesn't even live in California, and yet California, will most likely vote him in over Steve Garvey. How, is this guy just in office because Democrats are so good at sticking together?
Well, first of all, what you say is absolutely true. So it's an ever shifting target with Adam Schiff. He did definitely say that he'd seen more than circumstantial evidence of Russian collusion with the Trump campaign. He never provided anything of the kind. Now he's dropped back to three things are clear. The Russians offered the Trump campaign help. The Trump campaign accepted that help. The Trump campaign used that help. Everything in there is a lie. The Trump campaign received nothing from Russia. They used nothing from Russia. He points to the Trump Tower meeting between a woman Russian lawyer and Donald Trump Jr. Well, first of all, Donald Trump Jr. received nothing of value in terms of information or anything else from that woman. And it turns out that she was working for Fusion GPS, the left-wing research outfit that had basically fabricated the phony Steele dossier. She was briefed and debriefed before and after the Trump Tower meeting. Nothing of any value was exchanged. So Adam Schiff keeps changing his story. Now he hangs his hat on this idea that Paul Manafort, the Trump campaign manager, shared polling information with a man named Konstantin Kalimnik, who is supposed to theoretically pass it on to the Russians. It is the claim of both Schiff and Mueller prosecutor Andrew Weissman that was the Russian collusion. Here's the problem. Kalimnik is a U.S. intelligence asset. The independent journalist Matt Taibbi absolutely proved this, but also there was no proprietary, meaning non-public polling information in the hands of the Trump campaign at the time that Manafort allegedly passed this information on to Kalimnik. Kalimnik, who, by the way, previously worked for Senator John McCain. So it's a completely fake narrative, but having spent millions, I think $30+ million and many, many man hours and having unlimited legal authority, Adam Schiff and working with Robert Mueller and the special counsel, the truth is they could find no Russian collusion because none existed. You can go to stonezone.com right now. I have a piece that I just put up about the fact that the left continually comes back and recycles this garbage as if they never heard the explanation. And they have done it here yet again. Now, the bad news is that California has this unique jungle primary. So they don't have party primaries in which the Republicans and the Democrats select their nominee. They all run in one primary election, and the two highest vote getters go to a runoff, regardless of party. So you could have had two Democrats or selected here, but that's not what happened. So last time I saw the returns, Adam Schiff was locked into a dead heat with Steve Garvey, the baseball great who played for the LA Dodgers. They were running about neck and neck. Garvey is a Republican, but there were two other relatively strong candidates, Katie Porter, who is a progressive congresswoman from Orange County, and Barbara Lee, who's an African-American congresswoman from the Bay Area. They were third and fourth. I think just based on ideology, you can expect those votes to go disproportionately to Adam Schiff. And therefore, I would have to concede that he is likely to be the next U.S. Senator. That will not make him an honest individual. He broke the law and the rules as a member of the House. I fully expect him to do it again as a member of the Senate. You're right. We have a two-tiered justice system. He broke the law repeatedly in his efforts to try to destroy Donald Trump. The second impeachment, the Ukrainian impeachment, we now know is actually staged to cover what is really a crime by the Bidens. Indisputable. Burisma Energy paid Hunter Biden hundreds of thousands of dollars. Joe Biden used the threat of withholding federal funds from Ukraine unless the Ukrainians agreed to fire the prosecutor who was investigating Burisma and his son. Those are, regardless of what some FBI whistleblower may or may not have said, the House Oversight Committee has indelible proof that everything I just said is true, and therefore the crime pattern continues to be completely accurate. Yet I'm still trying to figure out why Paul Manafort, who was Trump's campaign manager, is charged with illegal lobbying, basically with representing foreign nations here, specifically Ukraine, without filing a Foreign Agents Registration Act registration. He actually gets a pretty substantial prison sentence for that crime that never was prosecuted previously. Interestingly enough, Manafort turned around on behalf of his Ukrainian client, and he hired Tony Podesta, who is the brother of Hillary Clinton campaign manager John Podesta. Tony Podesta is a high-powered Democrat lobbyist who then lobbied for Ukraine without filing a Foreign Agents Registration Act. But, well, Mr. Podesta has never been charged with a crime. Mr. Biden, Hunter Biden, has not been charged with a crime, despite the fact that he received millions of dollars from Russia, China, Ukraine, Romania, and elsewhere. So once again, the two-tiered justice system that you and I, Stephen, have spent so much talking about, it's in full display.
Yeah, it absolutely is. Okay, final question, Roger. I appreciate you coming on. So two big breaking news stories. Trump absolutely dominates Super Tuesday and Nikki Haley drops out. What do you think Nikki Haley's next move is? I wondered if the Democrats were going to try to replace Biden with her because she was taking on so much Democrat money. But just briefly, what do you think her next move is? And then what is the RNC's next move? Do they now all fall behind Trump? All that money falls behind Trump, and we really start getting the word out so that he can win?
Two excellent questions. First of all, Stephen, many states have what are called sore loser laws, meaning that if you ran in the primary in a given state, whether you won or whether you lost is immaterial. You are not eligible to be on the ballot in that state as the nominee of a different party or as the nominee of an independent party or pardon me, the nominee of a minor party or the nominee as an independent. And therefore, I think in every state that took place yesterday, Nikki Haley could not be on the ballot as either the no labels candidate or as a Democrat candidate. So that is a very substantial problem. I don't think she has a political future, certainly not in South Carolina, where she really embarrassed herself. Uh, will she become a Democrat? Wouldn't shock me. Perhaps perhaps she stayed in this race as long as she did to try to damage Donald Trump in the hopes that she would get a cabinet position in the next Democratic administration, if there is one. We have a long history, by the way, of bipartisan cabinets. President Franklin Roosevelt's War Secretary Frank Knox was a Republican. President Nixon, Secretary of the Treasury John Connally, was a Democrat. Bill Clinton's Secretary of Transportation Ray LaHood was a Republican congressman. So there's a long history of bipartisanship, at least token bipartisanship in the cabinet. Perhaps Nikki Haley, who is a full-throated cheerleader for war in Ukraine, she would certainly fit right into the Biden cabinet. Who knows? Maybe they can have her come in and replace Victoria Nuland, who is the architect of this Ukrainian disaster. But I don't see her having a future within the Republican Party. I watched her comments carefully. She did not endorse Donald Trump. It's just like when Florida Governor Ron DeSantis withdrew his candidacy. He didn't say, I support Donald Trump. He said, it's now clear that a majority of Republicans favor the renomination of former President Trump. So we'll be watching Nikki Haley very careful. To quickly grab the second part of your question, yes, I think new leadership at the Republican National Committee is about to take control. It is reported that Chris LaCivita, who to my mind could be the single most talented operative strategist in the party today at the mechanical and strategic level, is poised to take control of the National Committee and to fashion it into an effective force when it comes to the question of voter turnout and also election integrity. Time is short, but I have a very, very high regard for LaCivita.
Okay, great. I know we're short on time here. Is stonezone.com the best place? Where can people follow you?
Absolutely. Go to stonezone.com. You can not only see my daily show, The Stone Zone, but you can also see my weekly radio show at WABC Radio in New York. You can get all of my books there, The Man Who Killed Kennedy, The Case Against LBJ, Stone's Rules, the book about the things I've learned in 40 years in the political arena, with a great introduction by my friend Tucker Carlson. You can read my print journalism, great story today there about them recycling the Russian collusion nonsense. Stonezone.com. You can subscribe, Stephen. It's absolutely free. Go there right now and sign up.
Okay, I will put that down below. Thank you for giving us your time. Continue to put out good information, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, Stephen. Great to be with you again.